One of the areas that I find really useful for this conversation is getting an understanding of how we actually develop as individuals through life, and understanding that there are different capacities that are unlocked with new forms of development that allow us to operate in new contexts. So, for example, if we look at childhood, right, for babies are completely dependent, right? They need their parents in order to survive. And as we move through the developmental spectrum of being human, we move from being a completely dependent infant to being like the terrible two, right? And we find a way of coming out into the world where we start grabbing things and we start having this agency. Like I want this thing, I'm going to go and get it, right? And our parents' role at that point is to begin to set some boundaries. No, don't grab for that thing. You might hurt yourself with that, right? And yet we notice that there's different children orient themselves towards different objects, right? Some children orient themselves towards people, and they want to play, they want to talk, they want to babble, they want to sing, and other children orient themselves kind of more towards physical objects, right? Like I want to figure out how this thing gets pulled apart, like how do I build these blocks together, or whatever it is. And, we're usually somewhere on the spectrum where most human beings like to interact with a variety of things, but we tend to have our preferences. And then we move beyond just interest in our environment to interest with, oh, there's other out there that are kind of like me. So we start building friendships right around the age 5, 6 years old. We understand that, oh, it's actually more valuable for me to have friends than it is for me to have this toy. So I'm going to share this toy with you because then I'll have a friend and then we can play together. And that's more valuable than me just having the toy by myself, right? And so this quality of, oh, the value of connecting with others, of friendship, of having a relationship, of being together, of doing things together starts to come up. And then we evolve past that and we move into our teenage years, and we start to take the things that we've been learning up until that point, the rules, the boundaries, and we start to internalize them. And this is, the whole adulting that we look at, and the reason why we allow teenagers to drive cars and to make decisions about whether or not they're going to drink alcohol or things like this, because they've developed these kind of internal rules about how they lead themselves, right? What is it that I should do? What is it that I shouldn't do? How do I actually make decisions that are relatively responsible decisions? And then we move beyond that and we become a young adult. And different people move through the spectrum in different speeds, but it's a general sort of human quality of the way in which we develop. We move into young adulthood and we start to become like an expert or a specialist in something. We have some sort of area. Usually that's we go off to university and I become an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And we begin to realize, oh, I have different types of thoughts than other people have. I'm not just the same as all my friends. I have these unique ways of thinking, of feeling, that are actually different from how other people do it. My thoughts are unique to me. And I can actually think about my thinking and I can feel about my feeling. And now we begin to realize, oh, I can actually change the way that I'm thinking by thinking differently about my thinking. And now I can actually lead myself in a new way, which is not just leading myself according to the rules and the boundaries that I've picked up from my family of origin or from my community, but I can think of entirely new ways for me to think about things, right? And I can come up with entirely new inventions. I can think of ideas that have never been thought of before, and I can create things out in the world that nobody's ever created, and that comes from me. And so this whole idea of IP and I own this thought process comes up. And we have a lot of people out there in the world just could be creating businesses, could be writing books, could be coming up with some sort of entirely new thing that we've never had before. And that's that for up until, like you were talking about, the middle of the last century. Up until the middle of the last century, that was kind of part of the leading edge, right? We have had people like Henry Ford, go from we ride horses to let's create a car that actually, transcends the idea of horses being the machine, the vehicle that we use, to a machine being the vehicle that we use. But now we have a new generation of leaders that are popping out in the world that are coming up with entirely new novel ways of bringing things together. We have the Elon Musks of the world, right? Who like look at these different industries and they say, this isn't working very well. Let's completely revolutionize that industry and remake it anew and come up with an entirely new way to deal with that. That is in the benefit of not just me and growing my business, but that is in the benefit of the larger humanity, right? Where I see the impact that I'm having on those around me, on the world around me, whether it's from a sustainability perspective or whether it's from I hope that we actually survive as a species, an existential crisis. Let's go and live on Mars. And we think about entirely new ways of supporting, the flourishing of humanity going forwards. And that's where a lot of the kind of the leading edge seems to be happening on planet Earth right now. But we're starting also to see new forms of consciousness coming out beyond that. What is it that actually allows us to see beyond just the systems of systems that we have on planet Earth? And often what happens is we start to come back inside and we start to look at, how does consciousness seem to emerge out of me as a being? I'm constructing this world around me in the moment, right? Every word that I utter, every idea that I share, I'm creating it. I'm making it up as if it's something that is real. But it's not. It's an illusion. It's completely made up. Everything that I'm talking about, I'm making up in the moment. And then as I realize that, it's like, ooh, that's kind of almost a scary place to be, because it means that I have to let go of these egoic structures, these stories of who I think I am, of how I think the world works. And this is where emergence comes up. And we realize that everything is emergent, right? There is nothing that is stuck, that is always the same. Everything is emerging in the moment. The question then is, what's my new ground to stand on? If that is true and everything is emergent and I can't rely on the stories that I've been telling people about who I think I am and the way the world works, what is this new form of being that I can lead from, that I can be from? And so this is where we come into awareness of awareness, or conscious awareness, as being the new way in which we come out into the world. I'm consciously aware that these processes are emerging and unfolding out into reality. And how do I sit from that place where I can begin to let go of the attachments that I have to the systems, the words, the ideas, the processes, the thoughts that I have, and allow entirely new forms to come into my awareness in the moment and operate from that place? And we're seeing new leaders pop up around the world that seem to be operating from new places that have the ability to act in an emergent way, to be able to see beyond just, I can control my thoughts and feelings, or I can think about my thoughts and I can change them, to I can see systems and I can change those systems, I can evolve those systems, I can develop those systems, to, oh, I can see how things are emerging and how things are unfolding. And I can, as a conscious, aware individual, I can influence and mold and change reality as it's coming into being. And as we're watching and seeing that developmental trajectory come into being, we're noticing that there's still something else beyond that, right? There's something that goes a bit further than emergence, out into beyond just me as a conscious individual, out into the greater whole.
And so just before you take us into that next horizon, so you just walked through beautifully, narrating a developmental model in a story form rather than looking at a model. And you described the various stages through childhood and into adolescence and beyond. And by the way, there are several conversations that we have on portals where I walk together with a conversation partner along adjacent lines, although your story, and that's where the fascinating, the way you develop the story, because as you reached the adulthood story, what you then did in the narration of the story, you fused the development of the individual to a point where the development of the individual becomes a fused property into the development of the whole, because the two are truly inseparable, and the emergence of a mature, fully potentiated, fully realized human as a possibility reaches that threshold where its own development and evolution is now integrated, merged actuality and phenomena to the shape-shifting nature of reality at large. And I don't even think we need the scaffolding of an Elon Musk. We don't need to use that prop as a proof point or as an instantiation, even though it is helpful too, because more importantly is how you emerged with the story in the fact that its actuality is actually present in simply how people choose to live their life and create their story of their life and shape their families and their environments. So now I am interested where you're going to lead us next in the story, and where and what do you see that next threshold where we surrender the egoic consciousness and the IP, the I own whatever, and we find that life has this emergent property that enables us to shape together with others, and at that point leadership becomes a distributed co-creative process rather than just emergent in the self. And also I'm interested that as you develop that we do a bit of a reality check. Is this something that we can only muse about when we are prosperous and doing financially well and safe on that frontier? And or how is this going to, or is truly a space that, as you said, you're now seeing more people through different fields and through perhaps different frameworks and different language and different metaphors? Describe that, because what the portals of perception interest is really, that is the frontier, that is the core inquiry. How is this shaping leadership? How is this that you're describing so beautifully, which I didn't know you're going to lead us into this space in this conversation. So this is, we are not practicing here something that we rehearsed before. I'm discovering live, like anybody else watching this conversation, that you are leading us to that frontier. And the portal's inquiry is how is this frontier emerging in education, in parenting, in business, in health and well-being, in just about any other field, including how will those processes ultimately infiltrate and transform the most entrenched institutional memories, institutional building blocks of society, the legal system, the geopolitical system, the state system, all of those dimensions. But let's take it one at a time. We have the rest of our life to unravel that.
One of the questions that you asked there that resonated was, can we only think about this if we're financially, flourishing? And to a certain extent, there seems to be some truth to that. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If your basic needs aren't met, it's going to be hard for you to kind of start talking about self-transcendence and self-actualization, all that. It's like, well, I got to put food on the table today, and I need to go out in the world and figure out how to do that. And so we see different orientations towards different types of objects, right? So like I saw when we were younger, we focused mostly on physical objects, right? Like my toy evolves into, my friends, evolves into my sort of my standing in my community, right? And in order for me to have a good standing in my community, well, I gotta, have a house and a car, and that evolves then beyond that into the realm of thoughts and ideas. And I have unique different types of thoughts and ideas that other people don't have. And and I can see, or I can develop systems that have never been created before. And so it develops beyond the hard objects to like soft, subtle objects. And then we move beyond that again into what we can call like meta objects, right? Like objects of awareness, of consciousness, of timelessness, boundlessness, groundlessness, formlessness. These kind of objects that like, it's not just a soft, subtle object like a thought or an emotion, you know, love or thinking. It's even less tangible than that. It goes into beyond. How do we go? What's outside of time and space, right? What's in the timeless? What's in the boundless? And it's like, well, like from a logical, rational perspective of the mind, we can't really hold that inside the mind. And this is where different forms of, you know, meditation or, you know, self-awareness practices help us to be able to tap into some of these things that are beyond, right? It's fairly easy for us to grasp physical objects as human beings. Thoughts, a little bit more kind of like difficult to hold on to, but, you know, I can kind of make sense of them. Now we have the meta objects. There's like, whoa, how do I hold on to timelessness or unity with the universe, right? That's like outside of my control to hold on to. So this is where we sort of start to step out of the small mind and we get into awareness and awareness as a whole. And so we have these different types of objects that we focus on, from the hard, the soft, the meta. And then as we begin to reach towards the end of the meta spectrum of like, well, what is it that is beyond all being? Now we start to kind of unfold back into ourselves again. And it's like, it's not about going out and going beyond into the wider, greater universe. It's about being with everything, right? Being with the hard objects, right? The physical things, being with the thoughts and emotions as they're coming up, being with the meta. And how do I begin to unify all those together? How do I be as if I am all of those together, where there is no logical, reasonable, or rational differentiation between me helping my child and being a leader as a parent and supporting my child's development and leading a company of 100,000 people, right? These we make distinctions as oh, well, that's a more important role because there's more people involved. And it's like, well, let's break that down and realize that as conscious human beings, everything that we do matters. Everything that we do has an impact. From this conversation, every word that I use, every thought that I have, every motion that I make impacts, influences the world around me. And from that lens, as we look at being in the world, being of the world, how do I bring my awareness back to every single little, not just action, but thought, direction of my awareness? Where is it that I'm bringing my attention, right? And in this world today, attention is the new currency, right? This is why the biggest companies in the world are the Facebooks and the Googles, because they're not selling us anything. They're just gathering our attention and using it for other purposes. And so how do we consciously choose where our attention goes? And that's where, if we talk about building this new world that we want to be living in as a species, it's about, well, where are we focusing our attention? And in many ways, we're giving our attention away. We're giving it to the advertising companies. We're giving it away to the social media platforms. We're giving it away to these processes, these systems that either one, we don't really necessarily understand how they work, what the intention is behind them, or how they're actually impacting us. And so how do we consciously choose where our attention goes and how we can bring our attention to the areas that are actually in the benefit, in the support of the natural unfolding of our species?